Mabuhay, Kamustika. Welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. It's been 2 weeks since we had a live stream about 29 ways to keep your Filipina from becoming Americanized. And I have a series coming up on starting tonight with asking questions of a Filipina, because most people will start with online with a Filipina, and it's very helpful to have some questions to ask. And I've got a good number of questions to go over for tonight. And as I will emphasize throughout the live stream, these are questions I'm sure you could ask your own wife if you're married to a Filipina, because I had never thought about asking these questions um, when we were dating online. So without further ado, I will get into this. I had read an article recently that I will put in the description box just to be, fair and cite the sources, that was asking questions about your boyfriend. And I thought, or about questions to ask your boyfriend. And I thought that I could use those questions and use it for a man who is meeting a Filipina online. And I've changed it some, but I will give you the link there, and you can see the original questions, although some of them won't apply, and which is why I had to alter them to fit this video. So some others I omitted because I thought they were just too serious, but there is room for them to appear in a subsequent video about questions to ask a Filipina. I married a Filipina on May 10th of 2015 after knowing her for less than 8 weeks, but we did talk quite a bit. I asked the questions that were the most important to me and decided that the woman I was chatting with was someone that I should ask to marry me, which she did. Please subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea, where I do my best to teach about foreigner and Filipina relationships, especially as it has to do with marriage, where I think is where you get, the main benefits of it. It can be nerve-wracking enough trying to work up the nerve to talk to someone you've had your eye on that you can actually meet in person, and maybe even more troubling, chatting with a Filipina thousands of miles away. I think it helps to have a list of questions to ask that would serve to generate conversation. I'm going to list a whole bunch of get to know you questions that you can use on a webcam. I mean, you could probably use it on a text too, but to engage a potential Filipino wife. I will put as many of them as space allows in the description box, which is 5,000 characters. Now, before I do that, I think it's a good idea to dress nice, presented, something that looks good, and be courteous. Avoid foul language and not say anything sexually suggestive. And you don't want to get stuck in a lot of silence either. So here are some questions you can use to get to know the woman that could become your wife someday. And by the way, it is perfectly all right to have some silence when chatting with a woman. Don't feel like there needs to be a constant barrage or flow of words, because that isn't natural. It is normal to have pauses in conversation, so don't worry about dead air. If a question is asked, someone will need time to think about their answer. All you have to do is relax and let them think about what to say. Again, the hope is that on many of these questions, they will generate conversation. So make sure to listen to what they say. If you have a list prepared, then you don't have to worry about forgetting what question you were going to ask next, because sometimes when you're concerned about what to ask next, you're not thinking about what they're saying to you. And if you say, what was that again? You say that a few times, and they'll wonder what else you're paying attention to. So it's another advantage to having some questions down. And it's okay to ask her to repeat herself and explain a little more if you aren't sure what she said. It is possible that her accent could throw you off a little too. Um, Having a list also makes it easy to have a place to jot down some notes of your own. I was always thinking that I hope I'm not repeatedly asking my then girlfriend the names of her family members, for example, over and over, because I did want to get those, and I did have to write them down and practice them. And now it's easy. As I browsed through these questions, I realized that there were many that I don't know the answer to myself about my wife. I don't know how my wife would answer them. So even if you are already married or in a strong relationship with a Filipina, there might be some questions here that you could use presently. The next live stream I want to do would be similar to this, but it would be about questions to ask that are more serious that a man would use if he is trying to decide if the Filipina that he has been chatting with is going to be the one. After that, I'd like to wrap up this series with a live stream about questions to ask before actually marrying a Filipina. So the line of questions get more serious each time, and you will see. And please jump in with comments if you will. If you will, I don't know that this would take a whole lot of time, and comments are always enhancing to the experience and to the video. Let me know what your experience was getting to know a Filipina online and the things that you really wanted to talk to her about. Maybe even some things you were hoping you didn't have to talk to her about. But this is about, you know, communicating with a Filipina. Maybe you said hi and you set up a chat. Maybe you even have talked a little bit, a couple times or so, and you're kind of unsure what else there is to ask her. Well, there's a lot of things to talk about, and that's what I want to help out. So here are many questions you can use to feel comfortable and to stimulate conversation. Hi, Phil's to Phoenix. I'm sure you could respond to a few of these things. Let me know if you asked these questions or if there was any questions that, I don't know, you thought maybe you shouldn't have asked because we are talking about someone that you really don't know very well. So anything in that realm of asking questions to a Filipina, those are things that are certainly open to talk about tonight. So these are numbered, but they kind of start over when they go into a different category. So I'm not even going to bother with those. But the first one here is you could ask, where are you originally from? Where else have you lived? And what was your favorite place and why? Right off the bat, I couldn't answer what my wife's favorite place was. She isn't as talkative and doesn't offer up information as freely as I do. She knows my favorite place, Eden Nature Park, and of course, our wedding site, the DCG Inland Resort in Davao City, Philippines. Two places I look forward to seeing more when and if we can retire in the Philippines someday. If the Filipina you are chatting with doesn't say a lot, it may not be because she is bored. It may be that she is just shy. So don't pressure her to give you a reply, and don't assume the relationship has no potential or that she will always be as quiet as she is initially. So where are things and I'll list these in the description box, as many as I can, as many as I'm allowed to. So where are you originally from? I think my wife was born in a place called Tagum, I think. Where else have you lived? That might be the only one. I don't know. What was your favorite place and why? That would be nice to know. Another question here, what was your parents' relationship like? Some of these questions you will need to decide if you are even comfortable asking or if they are better left for a later stage of the relationship. And certainly in the beginning stage, the intermediate stage, and the I want to make real sure stage, that would be an appropriate question. What was your parents' relationship like? And hopefully it was a good one. I know my wife's parents have been married, got to be about 33 years now, and I'm sure they've had the usual ups and downs, just like anyone else. Um, Next question was, what was your relationship like with your parents? What was your relationship like with your parents? Hopefully it was good. Hopefully her answer does not indicate any kind of rebellious nature, and hopefully they are still together. But that's a fair question. Um, she may end up talking quite a bit about that, and then end up moving into talking about her many other family members. Do you feel your parents treated you and your siblings the same, or was there favoritism? And I like this question because it could reveal if there is some, bitterness present with her family. Who knows what it could reveal? But the question is, do you feel your parents treated you and your siblings the same, or was there favoritism? And there's a good chance that she's got a fair number of siblings. I may seem a little slow tonight because I really don't feel good. I haven't worked yet this week, and I've only been out of the house twice for medical reasons. So I don't feel quite as sound quite as enthusiastic. I am. It's just harder. Okay, so what kind of student were you? What kind of student were you? If she was a good question, she'd probably love answering this question. And it would be a good question, I think, to make her feel comfortable. Um, Certainly not a threatening question. Most people, don't mind talking about themselves. They probably find it easier than asking other people questions and concentrating on that. But this is a good question to ask her. What kind of student was she? I know that one because my wife was a good student. And when I was in the Philippines to marry her and meeting her friends, I think several said, your wife is brilliant. She's brilliant. And of course, she denied all that. She did go to college, and she does have a degree, which is nice because I don't have a degree. I went to a trade school actually for broadcasting. It was back in Minnesota in about 1981. Another question you could ask her, what are some of your favorite childhood memories? What are some of your favorite childhood memories? And, if you're looking for a younger Filipina, somebody in their 20s, she's probably not that far removed from her childhood memories. So hopefully all of those are good memories from her childhood. You could ask her also, what was your favorite subject in school and why? Mine, I told her, I'm sure, about the only one I liked was some kind of English class, with writing or language, because I did like words. I didn't really take too well to much of anything else. But that's a question, again, I don't know how my wife would answer. What was your favorite subject in school and why? Another one, what's the kindest thing you've ever done for someone? So I'm sure you could learn something from her response. What's the kindest thing that she thinks she's ever done for someone else? Another question, what's the kindest thing that somebody has done for you? And by answering this question, you probably get an insight into the type of things that she values when you ask her, what's the kindest thing that someone's done for you? I know one time I gave a coworker something. It was for their daughter, a basketball camp. I paid for that for her, and she's, I don't know how old she was at the time. Was she in the time 30s, 40? But she told me that was the nicest thing that anybody had ever done for her. So for her, doing something for her family, not her herself, but for her daughter, meant the world to this woman. So she told me that, and I've never forgot it. Uh, yeah, my wife's Philippine reality. Thank you for tuning in here to this live stream. Your wife's childhood memory is that she married you, Bob. Well, she wasn't quite a child. She was 26 years old, and one thing I do know about her, she bristles at the idea of me calling her a young woman. I called her a young woman when I first contacted her 3 years ago in March of 2015, 3.5 years ago, and she said, I am not young. I am a mature adult woman." And it's possible that other women in their mid 20s that you might talk to will feel the same thing the same way. So you might be complimenting them in your own mind, but they may not. They may take it as a bit of a slight, and that's, I don't know, probably how my wife took it. Yeah, just kidding. All right, I know you are. James Jensen, the man who asks the most poignant questions in the world, has logged in. I thank you for that. Should you ask her about former boyfriends, sex life, etc.? Well, this morning I was working on a video topic. I've got a list of about 65 or 66 videos to do. And one of them is, should you, because I think it comes up in one of these three live streams I want to do. Maybe it's the last one. But I don't want to reveal a whole lot about that. But who knows, who's going to watch this and who's going to watch that. But I think that it's totally fair with you, if it's important to you, to ask her about that. However, it just depends on the timeline. And for this part, these questions are more, less serious, get to know you, innocent questions, because you've met somebody, you want to give them a chance to see if there's any kind of chemistry with you, or if you reveal something to them that they make a mental note of and they want to talk to you again. This is just about getting to know you. But if you feel, let's say, the third stage, which will be I think I want to marry this person, but you know what, it's really bothering me, I really wonder if I should ask them about her past, I would say that's appropriate. I had a guy ask me about that once on the phone, and I don't remember how long he had been with her, but he did say, I want to ask her about, or I'm going to ask her about, to get tested for, sexually transmitted diseases. And, if that's that crucial to him, then I suppose he's going to do that. However, that would be a good way to scare her away if you ask it out of context, which is early on. But somewhere in the middle section, maybe you've been communicating a few months regularly, or towards the end when you say, hon, I really, I can see you as being someone I want to live with. I can marry someday, but don't take this the wrong way. But I read things. I don't know how much of them are true, but it does concern me. I don't want to know, all the details, but if there's a nice way to ask her, I think that's fair game. It's a very sensitive question, and you might want to think about how you want to phrase that question. I got married so fast, I didn't ask that, and I hope that there would be no reason for you to, to feel like, hopefully she doesn't say anything in your communication that would make you feel like, boy, I think I better talk to her about that. But look, this is a big deal. You're not with this person, they're far away, you're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time with them before you eventually decide to get married. So talking about money is a very potentially dangerous question, but it needs to be talked about. I mean, it really does. This is just another sensitive question that if you feel you should ask, just try to ask it in the right way. Philippine reality, 30 years younger. My wife is 27 years younger. And if you've seen my videos, you know that there are advantages to that. Obviously, that's something that's looked down upon here and almost never happens in the United States. But in the Philippines, it's much different. I do believe that the younger women in their 20s, especially mid 20s up, are a little more mature than maybe the women you might work with that are that age, and so they probably can handle, you know, some questions that are a little bit more difficult. You'll just have to see. James asks, how did you approach discussing the age differential? Didn't I tell you, James? I tell you what, I think this guy stays up at night and thinks of incisive questions to ask me, which is good because then everybody can learn from this. Discussing, my whole tongue and body is slow today. How did you approach discussing the age differential? Um, I'm sure I brought it up at one point saying, well, you do realize, you know, you're 26 and I'm 53. And I probably said, um, what do you think about that? You know, I'm 53, you're 26. What do you think about that? And her response was, in not so many words, you know, it's unimportant. It doesn't matter. I had also told this woman that because I just believe in full disclosure at some point. It doesn't have to be the first Skype chat, you know, but I do want to get things out because if somebody is not a good matchup for me, then I think it's best to try to move on as quickly as possible and not take up their time unnecessarily or your time. I even asked her, I said, you know, I've been alone for a long time. I've been alone for 30 years and I couldn't even tell you why. It's just that, you know, like other guys here in America, it's hard to find somebody you feel good about. And a lot of women don't even feel like they want to get married, it seems. And I told her that, and she said, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. When we were both talking about some more personal things later on, and we both realized that we had things in our life that, you know, we wish we could take back, she told me, here's her response. Instead of saying, well, how dare you talk about these personal things? She said, we just start over. You know, our relationship, we get married and we start over from ground zero. The past is the past, and we work towards, you know, our future together, and we just move on. So, in fact, even at our wedding ceremony, I remember her picking up the microphone and kind of, well, I don't know if it embarrassed me, but I was surprised. She said, and she was waxing emotional. She said, I'm going to help you forget about all those 30 years of being alone. But, you know, she was serious, and she most certainly has made me forget about those 30 years alone. They were just, it was tough, very difficult. And I haven't thought about those days before I married, since I married her, or even before that. Um, there's just no reason to. So the age situation was very simple, James. How do you feel about it? And her response was, it doesn't matter. And again, we're talking 27-year age difference, but I do know from the dating site, Christian Filipina, she said her profile limits for age was, oh boy, what was it? 30 to 55. 30 to 55. And I was 53. So this is a good time to say that I feel more comfortable chatting with somebody that doesn't have, you know, an indiscriminate age uh, preference of like, you know, 20 to 80 or 20 to 70, because to me that indicates they don't really have anything specifically in mind that they're looking for. But and some of them will say like, you know, 30 to 50 or 30 to 45 or 20 to 45, but then they'll say, it's negotiable, it's not a hard and fast thing, but that's their preference. So I was 2 years under the limit, and that made me feel good that, at some point she must have felt that age would have been a factor. But in my case, I just made the cut. Hello, Phil's to Phoenix. Generally, Filipinas are much more conservative than American women. Many don't even date until after college. That's true. Some of them are so pretty, and maybe this applies more to the provinces, but you just look at some of these women and it's just like, wow, it's just unbelievable how beautiful they are. And but yeah, they're largely inexperienced with relationships. And so what that makes me want to remark is that if you are speaking to someone online, newly acquainted person, Filipina, and they don't have much experience with speaking to a foreigner, and not a whole lot of dating experience, I don't know, just keep that in mind, because that might help you frame her responses a little bit better, than if you're talking somebody in the United States that's had, I don't know, 10 boyfriends or something. Their answer will be quite a bit different. But Phil's to Phoenix, I agree with your observation there. Philippine reality, the common answer I get from younger Filipinos about age differences: age doesn't matter. Gotta love that. And also, age is just a number. I've done several videos on the age issue. It doesn't matter. Absolutely, in some ways, it doesn't matter. And a more mature, stable man is often more than what she thinks she can get her own age in the Philippines, and that more often than not, that's probably what she prefers. Now, if there's like a 50-year age difference or something, then the dynamics of the relationship are different. The goals of that relationship are going to be different. But certainly if you're old enough to be her father, that and you have relatively good health, then I would say it doesn't matter, because she's probably more mature than you're expecting her to be, and she's going to want somebody that's more mature. So by and large, I agree with that, and I love that too, Philippine reality, because most men would desire, all things being equal, a younger woman, and there are most certainly advantages to that you shouldn't even be ashamed to talk about. The sexual intimacy will be there, and that's worth a whole lot. Her youth, her energy, her beauty, her ability or willingness to do different things. And if she's younger, she's probably going to pull you along and drag you into doing some things you might not want to do, but later on you'll be glad you did. Even in country, age gaps are more common. My in-laws have an 18-year age gap. In the Philippines, yeah, I think that's what you mean, Phil's to Phoenix. In the Philippines, you see that. So not just with a foreigner, but they want somebody, even if it's someone in the Philippines, that has some maturity on them. I appreciate you guys' comments as we talk about initial questions to ask a Filipina. You're interested in marrying a Filipina, but again, I say these are questions you can copy off of the description box and ask your wife, or the one you've been dating for a while, because you probably don't know some of these things. I certainly don't. The next question I had here was, are you close with members of your extended family? Are you close with members of your extended family? And this question was probably written originally for somebody not in the Philippines, but it was on there. And if that's a question you would like to ask, well, you most certainly can. Uh-oh, James Jensen, we might have to take a break here. Was it awkward meeting the parents when you were around their age, and how did you handle it? Well, James, you ask questions that nobody else seems to ask, but after you hear them, it's like, why don't people ask that question? Because it's a good one. And I kind of wondered about that myself. The first time I wondered about that was when I proposed, or rather, when I asked her father if I could marry her. My wife said I didn't have to do that. Other things I've read were, yeah, you really should. And I wanted to. Ended up being the entire family there in the screen. And of course, I was speaking primarily to Papa. And I was thinking at first, boy, you know, what does he think about this? But I can tell by his answer, and I can tell by how the relationship with the whole family has gone for the last 3.5 years that um, there was nothing to be awkward about. I asked him, I told him why. It'd only been a short time, I said, but I got to know your daughter a little bit. I have very good thoughts about her. And, I would like to marry your daughter and take good care of her. Would you allow me to do that? And so, if you're respectful and you're not there acting, like I don't know, somebody that's just in it for the sex, then if you're civil about it and mature, nothing to worry about with Papa. And being around him didn't matter. It's never mattered. We were talking a little bit after the wedding. His English isn't the greatest, or he's just not comfortable, talking to me. But I wasn't, I wasn't, I wasn't leery about anything, and he wasn't questioning my intent. In fact, the only words I really remember him saying was at our wedding, and it's probably the ceremony when Mom and Papa take the microphone and address you. As I'm moving the camera here with my elbow, and he said, "No more women." It was interpreted. He said, "No more women." So not that I had a whole lot to begin with, but what I knew was important to him from from those words, was that I be faithful to his daughter. And I think you can take from that if I was going to be faithful to her, that's all he really wanted. Be faithful to her and be good to her. So not awkward. And I was just matter of fact about the age group. Now, if I'd been, 20 years older than him, I don't know, maybe I would give you a different answer. But I think we're about a year apart in age. And Phyllis to Phoenix notes, I'm 4 months older than her mom, but her father is older. They were both very welcoming and friendly. Just be respectful and they'll be friendly. Thanks, Phyllis to Phoenix. So, James, there you go, from two different people married to a Filipina. Probably nothing to be concerned about there. Another question here. What are some prominent things that have happened? This is to ask the Filipina. What are some prominent things that have happened in your past that you think have contributed greatly to who you are today? And this is kind of a tough one, as it could take substantial time to think it over, but it's a good question, I think. What are some prominent things that have happened in your past that you think have greatly contributed to who you are today? On a lighter note, you could ask her, tell me about your favorite childhood pet. You could ask her, did you have a lot of friends as a child? Or did you just have a few really good ones? That's a good question. Probably the question I like the most here. Did you have a lot of friends as a child, or did you have just a few really good ones? I can answer that real quick. I just had a few really good ones. It's always had been like one or two at a time. So it's just me, I guess. Now, I didn't ask my wife this, but I know over 3.5 years of marriage to her that she has quite a few friends, many of them since elementary school. And I've met quite a few since I've been there 3 times. And I think it's healthy, to have a lot of friends. As you can tell from my videos, the quality of her friends is a big plus, and having a lot of them is good as well. You might ask her, who was your hero when you were growing up? This would indicate what she values. because if she has a hero, there must be something about this person um, that she likes, and it's just something for you to add to your notes. You could ask her her ideal vacation spot. I instead asked my wife where her ideal tourist place would be, and I guess that's saying basically the same thing. Um, Ideal vacation spot. Yeah, that's a good question. Now these other questions here are under the category fun questions to ask. Um, and me being typically more serious person would probably never think of any of these. But the first one is, if you could spend the day with someone famous, alive, or dead, who would it be? I had a date once a long time ago. I was wondering if she was dead because she didn't ask me any questions the whole time. Um, I know she answered my questions, but I ran out of things to say and I didn't know what to do after that. But that's a good question. You know, like myself, I would tell her, probably did, the Apostle Paul, because he was such a fervent, intense person. He was single. He had what we call the gift of singleness that most people don't have. And well, yeah, I'd love to talk to him about that. You know, he also encouraged people to get married. So boy, he was battered to a pulp many times for his beliefs. I just think he'd be an interesting person to talk to. Phil's to Phoenix, another serious question. Do you want kids and how many? Yes, that's a serious question. Depending on the Filipina, asking her at the get to know you stage could be a good thing or could be a bad thing. Now, if she really wants to have children and you come off, let's say the first couple times you talk to her, you're dressed nice, you're acting mature and respectful, and asking her about her family and really coming across well, then maybe the right person, if you ask this question to, do you want kids and how many, would be glad to tell you. Now, it also depends on the way you present yourself too. If you say, I have a serious question for you. Do you want kids and how many? That might scare her off. But if you're talking about some lighthearted questions or you're talking about family questions and you kind of throw in there, by the way, do you want any kids and how many? Well, that would kind of soften the blow of the question. So that's kind of a serious question, but then there's also a way how to say it that might, make it easier to ask that question. That's a good question. I didn't ask her that question either. Makes me wonder what we talked about for 4 hours a day. I knew when we got married, probably within a week of being married, that she wanted to have children. I didn't know at the time I couldn't give them to her. Still haven't been able to give them to her. Maybe I didn't want to ask that question. Maybe I was afraid to somehow. I don't know, but I didn't, and it certainly came up later. So yeah, that's a good question. You could ask her what was or is her favorite board game. I don't know if they play board games in the Philippines. Mine would probably be Chutes and Ladders. I played that quite a bit. Not Monopoly. That just takes too much time. And it's not fun anymore. So you could ask her to describe herself in a single word. Me asking her, how would you describe yourself in one word? And she'd probably have to think about it a little bit. Um, and I'll say this, how I would describe my wife, since I've never asked her this question, and I probably should tonight. But I would describe her as being supportive and unselfish, because I see the good that she's done for her family and friends. How they told me she would give them the shirt off her back, and so that's how I would describe my wife. I like to ask McDonald's or Jollibee. Coke or Pepsi, GMA or Korean dramas? They love those kinds of questions. James Jensen, I bet they do. Thanks for not asking a real tough one for me here. I think the answers would be Jollibee. I don't know if they have a Coke factory in Davao, where my wife is from, but I know they have Pepsi because I know her brother has worked there. The dramas, GMA, I think I've heard of. We've probably watched some of that when we were in the Philippines. So yeah, but those are good questions because it gets her talking, and those are good introductory questions. Why? Because it puts her at ease, should put you at ease if it puts her at ease, and then she can talk about something, that's harmless, but it's a good way to break the ice. So that's a good question to ask, James. Now, one of the questions on there was describe me in a single word, which would be you if you're talking to her. And I thought about substituting describe your ideal husband, but that would be for later if you even asked that question, because her answer could end the conversation quickly if the person she describes isn't at all like you are. I think it's too heavy a question for early on, but when you know each other better, hey, just play around and say, well, how would you describe me? But she's got to have enough time to have formed an opinion for that. You could ask her, who is your celebrity crush? I assume she has one. She may like it when you ask her what's the latest news of her, celebrity crush. Hey, what's going on with this person? And she'll appreciate that it was important enough to you to remember that. And then it'll make it easier for you to remember other details about her life. Excuse me. The 14-month cough is gone for the most part. You could ask her, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? For me, it would be I tried to eat squid last time, I think it was, we were there. Eating squid is like chewing rubber. I could not finish it. Neither do I think I ever swallowed it. But yeah, I really didn't even eat it. Another question, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten and actually liked? Well, I don't know about that one myself. You could ask her, can you tell me about your most embarrassing moment? The most embarrassing moment. You could ask her, what is your favorite item of clothing? Women like to talk about clothes, I suppose, with each other, but I'm sure she would enjoy, I assume, unless it's a lingerie or something. My wife would probably say shoes because she buys a lot of shoes. Now in the Philippines, well, mostly you wear flip-flops. Over here, you've got to have shoes for winter and spring and summer, and there's more variety for her. But I would say my wife would say shoes if I had to answer it for her. You could ask her, are you superstitious? And I've heard that a lot of Filipinos are superstitious. So she might say that, yes, she is. I don't know. Another question, you could say, if you could be anyone else for a day, who would you choose? If you could be anyone else for a day, who would you choose? It would tell you, give you some insight into her values, who she admires, and no doubt she'll tell you why she would want to be that person for a day. Another silly question they had here was, if you had a horse, what funny name would you give it? I don't know that many people have horses in the Philippines, but I suppose some do. There are a lot of dogs and cats, I notice, but as far as pets go. What do you think of public displays of affection? I like that question because we talked about it. I was hoping she would like PDA, public displays of affection, but she doesn't. However, it's different when I'm with her family. She's a different person as far as that goes, as far as, holding hands and Oh, I don't know, just being playful that way. If we're around other people she knows and trusts, I think she's more like that. But in general, if we're just out somewhere in public, yeah, no. You know, we sit in the back of the church where she'll put her arm around me a lot or rub my hair or something, but the only person that can see it is the pastor. So she kind of picks her spots with the public display of affection. You could ask her to describe her dream house. Now, I don't think this means if she describes a mansion to you that this is what she's going to expect, but that's another question you could ask her. Describe your dream house. You could also ask her, what's your dream job? I knew my wife was, she had done various jobs, I know, but she, at the time, she was a teacher for um, children with Down syndrome. But I had not thought to ask her what her dream job was. I've got a lot of things to learn about my wife still. Another question I had listed here was, if you're having a bad day, how can I cheer you up? I don't know about that. Probably not good early on, as it seems a bit too personal to me. But again, this question would probably depend on you, how you say it. If when you say, if you're having a bad day, how can I cheer you up? If the I means me personally, the person you really don't know very well, then it's a question for later. But if by I you mean anybody in general, in other words, when you're having a bad day, what cheers you up? How do you need to be cheered up if you're having a bad day? That may be a better way to ask that question. Another one, when you're sick, do you like to have someone taking care of you, or do you prefer to be left alone until feeling better? Let me get this annoying thing out of the way here so I can see the comments. When you're sick, do you like to have someone taking care of you, or do you prefer to be left alone until you are better? That's another question. We just have about 10 more or so. What's your favorite sport? You could ask her. And there are sports that are quite popular in the Philippines. Don't be surprised if she says basketball and volleyball are her favorite sports. I like basketball. We've watched some together here on TV, and she went to the games with me too. Now, you can also ask her, what sport would you never want to watch? She volunteered this to me. She said she would say, uh, well, she said soccer, golf, and baseball. I kind of would tend to answer the same way. You know, I like football and basketball because they're scoring. She doesn't like baseball or golf or soccer because to her, there's probably just not enough action. They like boxing in the Philippines, and that's probably because of Manny Pacquiao, of course, but they have I think, a long history of boxing there. But there's also a lot of constant action. So that's just something I learned about her and Filipinos, I think, in general with sports. Another question you can ask her, you could say, if you're lost, do you ask for directions? If you're lost, do you ask for directions? Well, I can tell you that doesn't apply with my wife because she never gets lost. Um, she's like the human GPS. Even here in Nebraska, we go somewhere she remembers, and there are times I have to ask her, well, what road did we take to get there? Because none of those things last very long in my mind. I can remember songs for decades probably, but how I got somewhere 3 days ago, not so much. But yeah, she doesn't get lost, so that's good because I still do. You could ask her to describe the ideal vacation for her, or you could ask her to describe an ideal weekend. So that's something you can think about because it may be something you can do for her, either in the Philippines when you see her or in your country. You could ask her what her favorite dessert is. Does she prefer coffee or tea? What's one household chore you don't know how to do? You could ask her what's one type of household chore you're unwilling or at least very resistant to do. You could ask her who's your hero, presently. Who do you admire? Who's your hero? Kind of similar to an earlier question. You could ask her what's her favorite book, what's her favorite magazine. You could ask her, how much time do you spend on social networking in a week? Some of you would really be interested in this, and we probably all should be, to make sure she's not addicted to social media. Um, well, we'll see. But you got to keep in mind her family, her friends, everything she knows and loves is very, very far away. And that's another video I've probably already done. I just haven't released it because I don't want to release everything at once, because then you run out of things to talk about. But then you just dial up James Jensen and ask him for ideas, I suppose. But how much time do you spend on social networking in a week? Two questions here at the end, because these are questions that weren't on the list, and these are questions that I thought about. Was what kind of music do you like? We know that Filipinas love to sing, so naturally they would have a great love of music. And these last two questions are mine, and again, surprised they weren't asked on the list. I couldn't believe it when my wife said she liked the Carpenters. She liked the Bee Gees. I think she likes Billy Joel. And these are all, like from the 70s. I wondered how she even knew who they were. Then, when I went to the Philippines, I heard a lot of songs from the 70s, even one sung by someone other than the original artist, but the songs were, from the 70s. And this may have been a small influence to me, because that was something we had in common. You can't see it here, but we just bought a karaoke machine. I did a video with us singing a song the other day, and we just bought a machine. And I've been practicing. Boy, I get dizzy just turning my head a little bit. Not doing well this week. So music, that's a big deal. Ask her who she likes. James, did you ask her what her idea of the perfect husband was? Well, of course, there is no perfect husband. You might say, can you tell me who or what kind of husband you're looking for? Or can you tell me what you like in a husband? The type of qualities that you're looking for in the man that you would marry someday. I'm just picking on, semantics here, because I know what you mean. Perfect husband, that kind of goes along with the question I kind of thought would be avoided back here somewhere. Probably can't even find it. Yeah, I can't find it, of course. But I wouldn't ask her about that, because what if it's not me? What if there's something about me? It could be ending it pretty soon. I would rephrase that, because frankly, right away. I mean, here's the thing: when you're dating somebody here in the United States, you feel no pressure to really get to know them well quickly, because you can just call each other up after work and go do something and spend hours and hours of time together. And with the Philippines, I think, in my opinion, you need to be more serious about your questions. You just have to be careful how you ask them and what point in the relationship you ask them. But the good thing about this question here from James is, if you get to know her that way, and maybe there's some things you can tell her about yourself that would give her the idea that you might be somebody she needs to continue to talk to. What I did with this was I told her what, it's kind of another way of getting there. I told her, well, hon, I'm serious about getting married. That's why I want to talk about some serious things, because I figured if the nature of the questions bothered her a lot, then she wasn't the right person for me. So I asked her early on, well, I want to be married real bad. And I believe that, the husband is the head of the home. There's a certain role for him. And there's a certain role for the woman that makes for the very best relationship that's often looked down on or dismissed here in the United States, maybe all around the world. But this is what I believed. And this is the type of husband I wanted to be. This is the type of household. This was kind of like what it would be like being married to me and good for me. That's what she wanted. So she was just overjoyed, very happy because of the things that I told her were exactly the things that she knew she needed to have, that she probably wondered if she would find. And from that point on, it was just a matter of, was I telling the truth? The way I talked to her and treated her, was that going to be consistent? None of us are consistent all the time, but was I generally telling the truth there? And so that's what I did. I just described not the perfect husband, but the best I could do, the way I wanted to be married. And she agreed with that. And that kind of made things happen pretty quick. Do you think that asking her that she is looking for a foreigner, does she not like the way her father treats her mother? No, I wouldn't. I don't know how she would respond. I mean, well, of course, why is she looking for a foreigner? Because she doesn't like the way her father treats her mother. I wouldn't say that, because I don't think there's any reason to put it that way. And she may never tell you everything about her parents' relationship. She just, that might be untouchable, off limits. The reasons she wants a foreigner and not a Filipino tend to be because of the foreigner's ability to provide. I mean, if the man's been working for 20 or 30 years and a lot of the choices her age haven't been working, or because they haven't been working, they spend their time drinking or loitering around. Well, that's why. That's the reason why. I don't think it's because of the way her father treats her mother. I don't know how my wife's father treats her mother. My wife has never told me. I've never asked her. So no, she's probably looking for a foreigner for a completely different reason. But you know what? There are foreign husbands that mistreat their Filipino wives. One of the things that she's worried about is if her foreign husband is going to beat her, if he's going to be abusive and mistreat her. Why? Because it happens with foreigners marrying Filipinas. So probably, James, her biggest worry is going to be how you're going to treat her, rightfully or wrongfully, because she's heard about this. She knows people. She's read people that have been mistreated. There's nothing you can do about what she's read and what her perceptions are, except, show her that that's not you. Don't lay a hand on her. Don't raise your voice, unreasonably. So that's all a guy can do in that situation. I appreciate your questions, everybody. Last question I have here as we close out questions to ask initially when you're trying to get to know Filipina, but you can still ask your Filipino wife today, would be, who are your favorite singers or bands? I think this would be a popular question. That's why I'm surprised it wasn't in the list. It doesn't surprise me that to this day, when I hear a new song, that my wife also likes it. We tend to like the same type of songs. There's just something about the music, some kind of theme that resonates with both of us. So, we enjoy playing around with the karaoke, and we like similar songs, and we like singing them. I even like the songs from the Philippines too. So, and I don't know how my wife would answer the vast majority of these questions. We've been married over 3.5 years. I guess that means there's a lot yet for both of us to know each other. I met her on May 10th, 2015. 17 days later, I was making plans to go meet her and marry her. I am stumped when I try to think about what we talked about when we Did a webcam on Skype in the morning before I went to work, even sometimes just leaving it on as I was cooking breakfast. As often as possible, we texted on Viber at my first break, lunch, and right after work, then did another Skype webcam in the evening. I estimate about 4 hours a day during the week and longer on the weekends. I have a coworker. He's an Ethiopian. He always told me that we were talking way too much on the when we were talking. Um, he thought, oh, maybe 15 minutes a day. And maybe that's just a personality thing, but we'd still be dating if I was talking to her 15 minutes a day. I think one of the reasons we got married quicker was we did talk so much in the time that we were engaged, and then continued to talk after we were married. The conversations changed a little bit. Had to ratchet up the seriousness of it and the topics, but yeah, we're still trying to get to know each other even today. I don't recall my wife and I intentionally trying to talk 4 hours a day, and it just sort of happened that way. I wanted a wife in the worst way, and it'd been a long time, so it felt good to have somebody to kind of come home to, even though they weren't literally there. Thankfully for Skype, we can do that, and then on Viber, there'd be messages waiting for me. That was something new to me. She wasn't overly talkative, but she'd leave me messages at night after I was in bed. I'd wake up, turn lights on, go to the bathroom, turn the phone on, and then ping, 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 here come her messages. So, one of my nicknames for her is Ping Ping, because I looked forward to hearing all those pings, because each ping, I think, was a message. That's a ping, but it's not on Viber. So now you have some questions to use with any Filipina dating prospect, as well as your own Filipina wife. Ultimately, I believe you have to marry someone to really get to know them well, and you may never know everything, but you need to start somewhere, and these questions can help you navigate to someone that might become your love beyond the sea. So I will answer James' question here, or comment. Just remind you that if I'm feeling well enough and I'm feeling terrible, in a couple of weeks, I want to do another live stream, but the questions are going to get more serious, because then we're going to be talking about how to more properly gauge if you're compatible. Maybe you've dropped some other people, and now you're focusing on some in different line of questions. And then 2 weeks after that, hopefully we can talk about even more serious questions, because now there's things you pretty much need to know. And the time for that is not right away, but there is a time for those questions, and we'll have those in the descriptions as well as these. And hopefully this is something that, whether you're married to a Filipina or just haven't started talking to somebody yet, that you will find helpful. Another question from James Jensen. Most girls look for a husband who is a lot like her father. That makes sense. You've heard people say guys tend to look for a woman that's a lot like their mother. I haven't given that a whole lot of thought, but I can believe this. Most girls look for a husband a lot like their father. So you know what? Maybe that means you should be asking her some questions about her father. Just say, hey, a lot of women think highly of their fathers. Their fathers play a very instrumental role in their life. Can you mind telling me some things that you admire about your father? And that's a good way about trying to find out if something about her, and maybe that's something that you can do as well. So that's all the questions I had. It's been an hour and 4 minutes, and I am still sitting down, and you guys can still ask some questions if you want, or make some comments. It doesn't even have to be about initial questions for a Filipina that you're dating online. Anything at all about the experience of being married to a Filipina, pursuing a Filipina. Just another reminder to whoever sees this later to subscribe to the channel. I've got, I think, about 27 more videos to release that I've already made, and I've got about 66 more to write, or ideas. I think I've written 20 of them and about 44 more to write. So I do have a lot of ideas, but I work 6 days a week. I'm very limited to how much time I can devote to this. That's why I do these when my wife is at work, so she doesn't feel like I am ignoring her. And who knows? I hope to be on short-term disability tomorrow because I feel totally terrible, and we'll find out tomorrow. But I've been sleeping most of the time. I appreciate your comment, Rodney Bishop. And while you're here, Rodney, between you and me, you got any questions about or comments about talking to a Filipina online? I know you have done that already because you're at the engagement stage. What do you think about early on, asking questions? Was your Filipina girlfriend easy to communicate with? Did you say anything that maybe she misunderstood or took the wrong way? Or were there certain questions that you felt you must have answered? Anything. I mean, were there any non-negotiables or deal breakers? If my wife had said she didn't like football, that would have been a deal breaker. I'm just kidding. She doesn't really like football yet, but I tell her football is so big here. Sports is such a big part of the culture here that I think she should learn about football. Because when I was in the Philippines with her cousin, he was very proud about the Philippine basketball players and the quality of basketball, how they've improved over there. So, yeah, it was fun watching basketball in the Philippines, volleyball. What else? Boxing. Boxing, I don't know much about, but they have a long history with boxing there in the Philippines. But anyway, Rodney, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Just my wife won't be home for another half hour. And I just felt like, hey, if anybody wants to talk about something, it can surely help everybody else, either tonight or whoever watches later on. So I appreciate that you appreciate the content. Should it be a danger sign if the girl avoids answering your questions? Of course, it could be. It depends. If you've asked her personally, if you've asked her a perfectly innocent question that would be normal to ask somebody. I don't know. I mean, if you said, how is your, I don't know, how did you have a lot of childhood friends, or just a few good ones? And if she's mum about that, who knows what that means? Maybe she's not very sociable. And so I would tend to think that any question that she just avoids, assuming it's not too personal, would be something to think about later. If you don't just come out and ask her, well, is there, I'll answer the question for you from my perspective, but is there a reason why you're uncomfortable answering that question? Or you just say, are you uncomfortable asking that question? Or can you tell me why you're uncomfortable asking that question? I mean, you might talk to her, for example, about what was one of the questions? Name the ideal vacation spot or something like that. And maybe the girl has never had a good vacation. Maybe she's never left her own town. Maybe she's in the province, and the idea of a vacation is she doesn't know what to say. So she doesn't want to tell you. She doesn't know how to answer that question. It could be something as innocent as that. If you ask her, well, hey, I've had 4 girlfriends, or I've been married before, or something like that. How many guys have you known? You don't have to say have sex with, but how many guys have you known? And if she doesn't want to answer that, that would be a serious thing, because we're talking about marriage here. We're not talking about kicks. And since you're limited in how much time you're actually going to spend shoulder to shoulder, I think it's appropriate to ask more serious questions. Just have to be careful not to hit her over the head with too many of these questions. Could be a danger sign. Yeah. CPAP Tokra. Is that a food, Phil's to Phoenix? I'm joking, but I don't know. That's probably a phrase in the Philippines. And maybe you've answered it down below. Rodney, I did have a couple deal breakers. The biggest was Christian and active in the church on her own. Absolutely. And you can find people. I know I talked to a guy just a week ago. That's what he wanted, and he was impressed with that. And that's what the lady that he was talking to was. And so he liked that. I wanted a Christian. That was a deal breaker. I suppose if you had some deal breakers, you could frame some questions around finding out sooner than later, just to save everybody time and trouble. That would be a good idea. Frame some questions around deal breakers. So I'm like you, Rodney. I felt that way too. Let's see who. That's somebody calling from my wife. She's not home. Rodney, my girl, was super shy at first. That could be. My experience was most Filipinas, and I talked to like 4 maybe before my wife, believe it or not, they were all easygoing, relaxed. And after a while, I realized, well, they've probably done this before. As I was the nervous one. They were just sitting back and answering the questions like it was nothing. Of course, I probably threw them a lot of softballs. It was only Isa that we really, asked some tougher questions about, because, we got serious quicker. And if she's shy, you just have to keep that in mind, and don't take that to mean she's hiding something. Don't take that to mean, oh boy, she's always going to be quiet, and I can't stand being around quiet people, because, I had a friend that said that because he was quiet. He said, boy, it scares me to death. I don't want to marry somebody that's quiet, because then none of us are going to say anything. So in my case, I'm the talkative one, and my wife has said many times I talk too much. I told her there's a lot of guys that talk more than I do. And I think she realizes now that she's been working. Some guys just like to talk a lot. How do you have guys in the news media and sports? Those guys talk all the time. So it's not just me. So I appreciate you guys' comments. Phil's to Phoenix, be willing and ready to reword the question in different ways. She may not understand the meaning of the question. Thank you, Phil's to Phoenix. That's another good observation. That's why I like to try to do some of these live, because you guys are going to think of things that I never thought about. Yeah, you may have to ask the question in different ways. It's okay to say, as long as you don't give the impression you're insulting her intelligence, ask her, do you understand this? Is this clear? Am I explaining this the right way? Something like that. Because I can tell you what this reminds me of, speaking of communication and asking questions. When we started together, we, for some reason, for the first few weeks, just were like typing everything out. She told me, and maybe she was uncomfortable talking, I don't know, but she started typing to me on Skype, which you can do. And so I started typing back. And so, 3-4 weeks later, we're still, typing to each other, because we just got used to that. And that was okay, because she was looking right at me and I was looking at her. And if there was any misunderstanding, we could square that away pretty quick. But I will tell you what might happen to you, and be wary of this, is if you're just doing a lot of messaging, maybe, after work or at break or whatever works out with your timelines, there's a chance that there's going to be some misunderstanding. there was one time I told Isa, I said, I've had it. I don't know what's going on here, but we just don't seem to be on the same page. Let's not text anymore, because if we have fights or arguments, it's always when we're texting. It's never when we're talking face to face on webcam. And a lot of that was, I guess, maybe I'm more expressive talking, but there were things that she didn't understand, and I would say it. One time I remember, because we had decided to focus on each other, and one day she asked me, "Are you still communicating with other women?" And I said, I and I said something. No, I had been, communicating with other women. Well, then she didn't talk to me for a while, and it was like, what is the problem here? And finally, one day, I remember now being in the parking lot, pacing back and forth, saying, "What has gotten into you? Are we going to get married or not?" And she said, "You said you're still seeing other women." Because I said I had been talking to other women. That's what I wrote, but I meant past tense. I had been, hun, I had been, but no, I'm not now, but I had been. I only had been, but not since we decided to focus on each other. Anyway, it's probably my fault too for not being more clear, but that little thing almost cost us. And it certainly caused us trouble. And I decided, look, no more texting. Even to this day, when she sends me a message, I'm not sure exactly, is she unhappy? How do I take that? And then I can end up reading it wrongly and thinking she's mad at me when she isn't. So misunderstandings, certainly be aware that could happen. Thank you for that comment, Phil's to Phoenix. Rodney, the biggest thing struggled with was her age, very difficult. James alluded to something along those lines earlier on. And you might be shy. I'm sure I was initially. How can you not be? You've never been talking to somebody, if she's a lot younger, since you were a lot younger, and things were different then because that was sociably acceptable. Now, even though you're telling yourself, oh, this is common in the Philippines, she knows people have been married to older foreigners. Maybe she's dated older foreigners, but that doesn't seem to matter when you start communicating, because you're thinking, oh boy, this feels strange, or something like that. But you really, need to realize. Well, hopefully she'll be like my wife and put that to rest and say it doesn't matter. Age isn't a number. Your past doesn't matter. My past doesn't matter. And we did talk about our past. We had to at some stage, not right away, but at some stage. And we decided to wipe the slate clean and move on with our lives together, the age gap not being an issue. So I was initially hesitant or a little bit shy myself, Rodney, but yeah, that didn't last very long. But I can certainly understand that being something that you're thinking about. But all I can tell you is, from being married to a Filipina, knowing other people married to Filipinas, it doesn't matter. We just did karaoke at a couple my wife met a couple Filipinas at work, new friends, and one of them's 23. I think her husband's 62. I'm not going to mention the names. I don't know if they'll be watching, but the age gaps were, about 24, 25, and then a lot higher. And mine is 27. I know a guy I just talked to on the phone here a few hours ago. He's 79, and his Filipina wife, he's trying to get here, is probably 30. So, that's just part of the culture, and nobody has to feel ashamed about that. I still like to know what SEPAK Tokra means. James, I'm a bit put off if they answer with one word and don't like to tell you much about family or friends. Well, yeah, and I think the reason probably you're a little bit put off by that is one word answers make it tough to communicate. It means you're just asking a lot of questions, and eventually you can't think of anything else to think of, and that gets kind of boring, and you don't want to marry somebody that, you'll always ask them questions that get answered with one word. My wife is like that. I've heard other Filipinas are like that. So keep that in mind. If you say, hon, how was your day at work? Probably 99 times out of 100, she's going to say, good, okay. Mostly it's good. And so what I've learned to say was, if she says good, is what was good about your day? How was it good? Or if I know about certain situations at work, I'll ask her about those situations. And, you know, if you're married to the woman and she says good, sometime eventually she's going to expound on that. But initially she says good. In fact, the Ethiopian man I mentioned earlier, his wife does the same thing. Whatever he asks her, good. How did it go? Good. How's your day at work? Good. I'm not like that, and so that's just a difference between us. But yeah, I would feel uncomfortable saying, do you mind answering with more words? All you have to do is just try to ask her politely to expound on that. And if she still doesn't, then possibly it's going to be that way all the time. And maybe she's not comfortable with her language. That's true. And not talking much about her family or friends, that's a good feeling, James, because, I've talked a lot about her friends. There's something that you can learn about her. She's not going to have a certain kind of friends, and then she's going to be totally different. I mean, she's going to be like her, she may be like her father in some ways, but she's going to be like her friends because she chooses those friends. She's not going to choose to be around friends she doesn't like. She's going to choose to be around friends with similar values. And if you happen to be chatting with someone and they tend to dodge that question about her friends, well, either they don't have a lot of friends, which she's embarrassed about. Maybe I don't know. She lives somewhere where there's always people around. So I don't know. I would ask more about that. Well, are you uncomfortable talking about your friends, or is there a reason you're uncomfortable talking about your family? And just do that and see where she goes with that. I wouldn't close the door on it. I would want to find out. Boy, that's strange. Well, tell me about your two sisters, or your next oldest sister, or tell me about your nieces, or your papa, or your cousins, or which family member you're closest to, extended family. And if she's hesitant to talk about that, no doubt there's a reason. I can't think it being a good one, but I guess you would just have to ask her. My wife didn't have any trouble talking about her family, so that wasn't something we had to deal with. But yeah, definitely things to notice, and then ask yourself, am I comfortable digging a little bit deeper? And probably, you'll have to do that if this is somebody that you're kind of interested in. And sure, Phil's the Phoenix. Some are embarrassed about how they speak English and will prefer to text until they feel comfortable with you. And some people marry women that don't even speak the language, which I never would say legalistically, you never do that, but I wouldn't do that. As long as you can understand her, that's the main thing. That the two of you can understand what her limitations are at this time, and and she doesn't get mad at you asking for clarification. That's probably not a big deal. If she's younger, she's like, let's say, I don't know, 20s or 30s, she probably will learn English faster. Let's say if she immigrates to your country, although English is spoken in the Philippines, a lot of younger women, don't tend to speak it while they're at home. So they don't get quite the practice that they could because they just speak, their Philippine language. But if she's immigrates, yeah, and she'll learn to speak English much better that way. So yeah, that her family is like that. My wife says, oh, they can speak English a lot better than you think, but they're just shy to. Because I'd love to be able to, Skype with them and have conversation, but like I would, I think they get a little nervous about that. I would do the same thing. I would do the same thing. So yeah, good comment. 62. Well, life is what you make it. There are risks involved with any relationship. Nothing wrong with a gap. I think, as I said many times, if you can meet the needs that she has, she can meet the needs that you have. Ultimately, I think that's what marriage comes down to, is that relationship being good to each other. Rodney, it does amaze me, and I had a lot to learn about age differences. Uh, well, I'm not sure what you mean. Learn about the age differences. Did you mean that your wife is at an age where she acts differently than women do in your own country, which is the United States? Um, you can clarify that with me if you'd like, but you don't have to if you're not comfortable. I know the women probably are more mature. Like I said earlier, my wife was 26 and she didn't want me to refer her as a young woman, even though I think she was. But she didn't like that. She didn't see herself that way. Um, a younger woman, like 18 to 20, probably would not be nearly as mature as somebody 25 to 30 or more. And it's just something else to think about. It would be interesting to have questions of somebody that's 18 or 20, because I wonder the kind of depth that conversation would have, and maybe it would surprise me. I don't know. And Phil's to Phoenix, do a YouTube search for Sepak Tokra. It's a Filipino game. You're talking about board games. Kind of across soccer and volleyball, so it's not a board game. It is a national sport. I've never heard of it. I have to ask my wife about that one. Cross between soccer and volleyball. I'm not sure I can even picture that. Soccer to me is boring. Volleyball is extremely repetitive. Volleyball is big here in Nebraska, big time. It's that's interesting, about Rodney Bishop. Did her family accept an American courting her? Well, they certainly did. I proposed to my wife online on day 18. I asked her family if I could marry her probably around day 25 or 30, something like that. So we really didn't have time to court. We just decided that we wanted to get married, and we would learn about each other, continue to learn about each other after we got married. I'm not going to suggest that for everybody. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's comfort level is different. And but we talked about the really important stuff, fairly soon, because she wanted to get married too. And I had to ask her just how bad, how bad do you want to get married to someone like me? Because this is what it would be like. And she, she thought I was the person that she was looking for. But her family had no trouble with it, and I was the first one. My wife, the first daughter to get married to a foreigner. Nobody else has. I don't know if anybody else will. Not every Filipino wants to. They didn't have any trouble. As we've met, more. I've been there 3 times. They're more comfortable with us. The last time we got to the Philippines, the whole family greeted us this time. And when we left at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning, when we departed for the airport, everybody was there, because my wife said, well, they're more comfortable with you. You're not that I never was part of the family, because I was, but I'm not there all the time. But their comfort level will be, I think, tied to how I treat their daughter. If her daughter has good things to say about me and I'm helping them out and allowing my wife to help her, family should have no trouble whatsoever with the foreigner. Easily, I don't know, Rodney, which you're referring to as far as the easily. Oh, was that the most difficult part you had about communicating with your fiance. I had a lot to learn when it comes to whether or not when should be concerned about age differences and what that means within a relationship. As a North American, probably says 8 years older, I was very surprised how mature young ladies are in the Philippines. Yes, they can be very mature. They're not fazed by the idea of marrying a foreigner. I'm never concerned about an age gap. I'm always concerned about, will that foreigner treat her well? That's my main concern, and that's probably her concern also. Age differences, yeah. It would make a difference, I suppose, when the guy begins to decline. I'm 57. Now, you get to the point where, your energy is gone, your, sexual vibrancy or whatever you want to call it is diminished, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen sooner or later. The older you are, the more likely you are to have health problems. And but a Filipina would not mind being with you to take care of you. If you've been to the Philippines enough, you've probably noticed that they take care of their elderly, and they have respect for the elderly. I know my wife would take care of me and be good to me when that time comes. She wishes I was younger. She says, I wish you were 10 years older than me instead, because I would live longer with her. But that's the downside is you better make the best of it, because your time is limited. If you're older, but a Filipina younger one can make you a great wife. And age difference, probably, unless you're extremely old-fashioned, and you marry a younger Filipina and she's not that way, well, that could be a problem too. But it might not be so much the age; it's just the values maybe that she has. So Rodney is usually considered a big age gap in the Philippines. 30 years considered very acceptable. So in consideration of age differences, yeah, I had a lot to learn. That's usually the cutoff that I always use, Rodney. 30 years personally, I think bigger than a 30 years age gap, depending on the age of the man, it becomes a little bit more problematic. There's more issues that can happen. But if the Filipino, and you should talk about this eventually, I should say, well, I'm such and such years older than you are. Have you thought about what that means for our future? Good question. When you're more serious, I wouldn't ask it the first few dates, but eventually ask her, what do you think about our age gap? What do you see as issues that, we both may have to deal with initially and later on? That's a fair question. But I agree, 30 years is considered very acceptable. Beyond that, it probably could be more issues, more things you just have to realize may not be happening like they used to. But yeah, age gaps are very common. But you know what? If you're the same age, I've seen people same age with their Filipina, and they're very happy. Why? Because there's more than just the age or the beauty. It's the values of the Filipina. They are caring and supportive, and that's a good thing. I think foreigners are interested in Filipinas not just because of their beauty or their youth, but because they think they make better wives. So again, if you're seeing this later on, please subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea. I am married, and I want to help other people that are married, not because I know more than they do. I just decided to have a channel where I talk about what I've learned and what I know about my marriage to a Filipina. Hopefully I'll be doing this for a while. And, every year I've been married to her, the videos take on a little bit different nature. Some of them are older. I just haven't released them yet. But that's natural because our situations change. We go through more situations. So hopefully that only helps the channel become more valuable to everybody else. So to you gentlemen that were nice enough to help me out tonight and be here for this live stream. I appreciate it very much. Don't know what your work situation is. 5 o'clock seems to work out good for me. And I do appreciate your comments. It just makes for a more well-rounded presentation when you guys ask some questions. And I appreciate that. So hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll do it again. Only we'll step it up. More serious questions when you're trying to gauge compatibility with your Filipina. So I will sign off tonight. Thank you again and look forward to talking to you soon.